Congratulations on a terrific report. And I want to cut to the chase of 10 big picture things, except the major message here is the mathematics of how everything seems correlated in 2019. That's an extraordinary insight. This time is different because of these correlations.
Absolutely. If you look, the top risks have remained the same top risks over a couple of years.
Exactly.
What has changed is, A, they are interdependent, and secondly, what has made us humans successful in the past might endanger us going forward.
We've got the different the social issues, climate change and that, but I'm going to go, Ian, to social discontent and local conflicts, which you were way out front on, almost the new populism wrapped around themes like pollution, climate change, even infectious diseases.
Well, the social unrest underpins so much of the geopolitical instability right now. And it's happening in 2020 as the global economy starts to slow down. I mean, the one thing you could say about the geopolitical risk trends, the technology risk trends, the climate risk trends, is they were happening at a time when governments had a fair amount of ammunition to be able to resolve them. You could throw money at people. This year, that's going to get a lot harder, but the governments are still much more fragmented. The level of social instability, the major demonstrations you see in various countries around the world right now, whether it's Ecuador, whether it's in Hong Kong, people on the streets extremely angry that their governments are not getting it done for them. The social contracts aren't working. In 2020, these things come together.
But is it not just a general level of uncertainty that is actually the most difficult thing to predict? And Thomas Buberl, when you look at the interconnectivity of risks, which you highlight in this great report that you've done with Eurasia, are we understanding the consequences? Is it the butterfly effect that something could go wrong in Hong Kong or elsewhere, and we don't realize the impact it has in some of our Western democracies?
Absolutely. I think it's really different now, the interconnectivity and the link to the social tensions. If you take technology risks, we've spoken a long time about cyber risks. Now it's very much beyond cyber risks. It's the question of artificial intelligence, the use and storage of data. It's about the question, how do you leverage technology from a geopolitical perspective? And that has obviously consequences on the population, on the cohesion of the population, because many people will not participate in the fruits of this technology revolution than they used to in the past. And this interconnection and also the uncertainty about what is going to happen and how do you make laws and regulation out of it really creates a massive difficulty in an environment where the multilateralism, this multi-stakeholder approach is not guaranteed anymore, because you today see many patchwork initiatives that don't necessarily show a big amount of coordination.
Ian, if it's the same risks over the last 2, 3, 4, possibly 5 years, what does it take for these risks to get fixed?
Well, I mean, the question, it's increasingly you're focusing on governments that are not capable of action. When I look at all of the advanced industrial democracies, the places we were counting on major responses, I mean, the only government that seems strong today is Prime Minister Abe in Japan. That's a shocking thing to say. So it's not going to come from the governments. It's not going to come from the multilateral institutions, from U.S. leadership. Instead, it's increasingly coming piecemeal, coalitions of the willing on individual thematic issues, which would be fine. And that's what we saw at the United Nations General Assembly on education. That's what we saw on dealing with lethal autonomous drones. It would be fine if the risks weren't macro and interlinked. But they are. And that's a serious problem. So again, the assessment here is not so much that the risk environment in terms of the themes are so different than they were 1-2 years ago, but rather the interlinkage is making it much more urgent. Yeah. And it's pretty clear that they don't get resolved in 2020. This isn't a fun report, Frank.
No, that brilliantly said. This is not a fun report, but the two of you, and let me begin with great respect for the gentleman from Europe. Victor Henry, 1939, Hermann Vauch's The Winds of War. And nobody saw it come. Well, not nobody, but basically nobody saw it coming. Are there elements here of the late 30s where there's a cacophony of emotions that get us to real challenges? I'm not saying World War II, but gets us to real upset in 2020?
I would not exclude it, because when you look at the social fragmentation, also coupled with the fact that we are living in a low interest rate environment that drives the fragmentation even more, I do not exclude a much broader way of rebellion within countries, and you've seen many pieces of it in Hong Kong, in Ecuador, in France. This is likely, and we need to be prepared for it.
Most of the fights are internal, not international right now. But to be clear, but to be clear, that internal fight includes the United States. And for the U.S. to be such a significant piece of the global risk environment...
Is it missing in action right now? I mean, is the leadership just not there with the president?
It's worse than missing from action. It's actively expanding the risk environment. I mean, if you look at what's happening in U.S.-China right now, you look at what's happening with Turkey, Syria, Russia, these are issues where the Americans have actually inflicted greater risk on the global environment. It's not just about being missing in action right now.
And Ian, there was one interesting figure in the report, which was about the fact that the respondent believed that 80% believe that the governments are not ready to solve those conflicts. That's so you asked your question, who will be able to solve it? And I think that's a big question.
That's right.
But so, Thomas Buberl, how difficult is it to lead an organization like AXA? I know you're doing this because insurance companies need to look at the risks. But how difficult, as a chief executive, is it to make the right decisions in how to lead the company and where you grow and where you retrench?
So, I mean, if you look at this environment from an insurance perspective, it's actually a very prosperous environment because risks have increased, the aversion to risks have increased, and we are there to help people understand the risks and prevent the risks. So you could call this, what's happening now, a new golden age of insurance. Nevertheless, changing your company, transforming your company and making sure that you redirect your efforts towards these new risks always comes with a massive amount of anxiety in the organization, with a massive amount of lack of courage, and leading an organization in that direction in these times is very difficult because it's not one person who's got the answer.